Do you guys know the difference between a misdemeanor and a felony?
Misdemeanor is like a lower charge, and then a felony is like a higher charge.
Yeah. So misdemeanors, our legislature classifies crimes in different levels of severity. And a misdemeanor is any crime where you cannot go to prison.
Thank you all for joining us today. We are here at Messmer High School for a panel discussion on Know Your Rights. I am joined here today by three studious students that are part of the AP Government class here at Messmer High School. So glad to have them be able to join us. And then we also have the esteemed lawyer here, criminal defense lawyer here, Justin Padway. I'm going to have the three students introduce themselves, and then I'll have Justin introduce himself. So go ahead.
Hi, my name's William. I'm a senior at Messmer High School.
My name is Demayan. I'm a junior at Messmer.
My name is Mia, and I'm also a junior at Messmer.
And then my name is Justin Padway, and I'm a lawyer at Padway and Padway Law Offices, mostly doing criminal defense work.
All righty. Thank you all for being here today. I think it's wonderful that you guys would spend your Saturday with us today, especially on the topic of Know Your Rights, just about education and things like that. I know you guys, when we're talking off camera, you talk a little about what you learned about in class, and who better to speak to it than the expert criminal defense lawyer here. So for just to kick us off a little bit, just to get us in the flow of things, tell us a little bit about your background and your story.
Sure.
What led you to become a criminal defense lawyer, Justin?
Yeah, so I grew up in Milwaukee. I went to Nicolay High School, so not too far from Messmer High School. And I was lucky in that my father was a criminal defense lawyer when I was young. So I had exposure from a very young age to criminal defense work and just the government in general and understanding my rights. And I found that really incredibly impactful and powerful. So growing up, I had a lot of my babysitters would be my father's clients. And these are the people that society would say is a criminal or somebody that's accused of something and would be judged. And I realized that there were really good people within the justice system worth fighting for and worth defending. I felt like the exposure for me made me want to become a criminal defense lawyer. So that's why I think this is so important, to give other youth that might not have a parent that's a lawyer or know a lawyer that same type of exposure. I ended up then going to New York, and I went to law school out there. I worked for what's called the Innocence Project. So if you've never heard of that, what that is it's an organization that tries to remedy wrongful convictions through the use of DNA evidence. And through that process, I was able to see a lot of prosecutorial misconduct, a lot of innocent people that went through the system and may have been convicted as a result of racial bias or other types of obliteration of due process rights. And then I felt like it was really important at that point in time to ultimately take this path and become a criminal defense lawyer, to be able to defend people's rights and help youth and other people within our community ensure that their constitutional rights are protected and that they're afforded the same due process rights that we all believe people should be afforded.
Mm-hmm. And I think, Justin, if you can continue going, the When They See Us movie, you were doing some things in regards to that, trying to get was it the individual that you were working with that was part of?
Yeah, so when I was at the Innocence Project, I had an individual that I was representing in that period of time that we were able to uncover a wrongful conviction for, which is, when you think about it, the most important thing that we have is our liberties. I mean, we all love our freedom. It's fundamental to the American process. And when people are wrongfully convicted, it's probably the worst thing that could happen in society. So while working at the Innocence Project, we were able to uncover a wrongful conviction for an individual that was in Durham, North Carolina. He had served approximately 20 years for a crime he didn't commit. And then later on, we were able to see that through DNA evidence and through going through the old case file, finding evidence that was withheld, which would be a due process violation, and ultimately through the exoneration and use of DNA evidence, that this person was exonerated for something that they never committed yet served an extensive period of time for.
Mm-hmm. And the only reason why I brought that up, because I don't know if you guys watch Netflix, but When They See Us is kind of like some of the things they was talking about. where the Central Park Five and things like that, they were, you know about that, Mia?
Yeah, I watched
okay,
it.
cool. I just want to make sure. Quick question to you guys. Anybody can answer it if they can. Do you guys have any idea when it comes to the difference between a criminal defense attorney and a prosecutor?
Criminal defense, that were like they defend the criminal on their behalf, and then the prosecutor like goes against that almost.
Yeah. So, yeah, in essence, that's what it is. So a prosecutor works for the government. It could be a state prosecutor or an AUSA for the federal government. And their job is to keep the community safe. At the end of the day, police officers investigate a crime, and then they take that evidence to a prosecutor, and the prosecutor uses that discretion to decide whether or not they're going to charge an individual with a crime. Now, the crime could be a federal crime, which is a violation of federal law, or it could be a state violation. And then a criminal defense lawyer, their job at the end of the day is to look at the evidence and ensure that the individual who's accused of something, not found guilty of something, but accused of something, has the due process right, meaning they're getting a fair trial, meaning the government obtained whatever evidence they're going to obtain through constitutional means. So we know we have constitutional rights. We know law enforcement can't just go into our home and search our home. We know they can't just seize us for any reason. We know they can't just search our vehicle for any reason. Mm-hmm. So a defense attorney makes sure not only the state can prove this beyond a reasonable doubt, but that there were no violations into your privacy. Mm-hmm. And then also really to humanize the individual that's being accused to make sure that there is a right outcome and that they're advocated for.
So when we thought about this, when Justin brought this up about the Know Your Rights, right? We were thinking about the young people and a lot of things that are going on in society, but let alone Milwaukee, right? So when you think of, your rights as a young individual, right? Why do you think it's important for young people to understand their rights when they're navigating the world that you guys live in? I mean, a lot of individuals are catching a bus home, they're walking home, they're driving, you guys are working. Why is it important for young people to know their rights?
So that we don't get taken advantage of growing up and going into our future. And knowing our rights is important because if, let's say, like, I'm sorry.
No, take your time.
Okay.
Take your time. No pressure.
Like if we didn't know our rights and the government was like, hey, so all these younger people don't know their rights, we could change something behind their backs and they would never know that they had that freedom in the first place.
To piggyback off that, there's a lot of young people that I know personally that don't realize how important it is that they still have rights, even though that they might not be into politics or like understand or even know it. A lot of young people, especially teenagers, get taken advantage of, or their rights aren't held to the same extent as an adult that knows or would know their rights. And it's important because everyone is human. Everyone still has that right to be obligated to have their own rights, and they all are under the law. And it's important that they know that so they can be treated fairly.
Gotcha. Anything, William? No pressure.
Not right now.
Okay. Justin, why do you think it's important for the young people to understand their rights?
Yeah, I mean, I think you guys really nailed it. Obviously, it's really intimidating whenever law enforcement were to talk to somebody, whether it's an adult or a youth. And the reality is you have these rights for a reason, but you can only exercise them if you know them. And they're given to every single citizen for the very purpose of protecting you. So you can only exercise them if you know them. Mm-hmm. If you don't know them, I think there is obvious opportunities for law enforcement to take advantage of you to try to gather evidence in ways that they wouldn't normally be able to gather evidence. So it is incredibly important that you empower yourself with them. And I guess I'm just wondering how many of you think that youth or just general people in society actually do know their rights or do know how to handle certain situations?
Not a large population. Yeah, I think it also comes from the lack of parents teaching it or thinking it's important to teach it. Mm-hmm. A lot of households don't really push or emphasize the importance on when you become an adult, you need to know these things and you need to start practicing now so you know how to handle certain situations and how to hold yourself when, you get older and stuff like that.
I feel as though many people don't put a need to know their rights, but it should become a necessity as we become older.
Yeah. And does your school teach you about your rights just out of curiosity or?
Mhm. So our AP government class, like you mentioned, teaches us about our constitutional rights and things that we are able to do and are not able to do under the law, and what the government and law enforcement are also in their rights to do and not do, and how we can protect ourselves um, with our constitutional rights in certain situations.
And that's great to hear. And one thing that I was listening was when Mia mentioned, like, a lot of times the parents, right, and don't tell their kids and try to prepare them. And I would be remiss to say, like, sometimes the parents are educated, unfortunately, so they may not even know. So then
Mhm.
it continues to go, and it continues to be a ripple effect on down generations. But it is important, and I'm glad that you guys are being able to obtain this information from not only your school, but even being participating in this as well. So, next question I have, specifically for you guys, really quickly, and then I'll have Justin expound on it. What misconceptions do teenagers have about the criminal justice system? What have you heard them say? Like, it's not fair. Like, what do you typically hear?
That the criminal justice system is against minorities and people of color specifically, or that the justice system as a whole isn't in the favor of the youth or like younger adults and stuff like that.
Common one I've heard is that they won't, like the justice system won't get you because you're younger, and that's not the case at all.
Mm. And I also think like that the system is like just not for us. It's like they think that they are targeting us, like people of color. But I also feel like because of the lack of rights that we have, I mean, the lack of knowledge that we have about our rights, um, like,
It contributes to that.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
There you go. I got you. Don't worry about it, William. I got you. And you being a lawyer, like, what misconceptions have you heard? And are these things that you heard before?
Yeah, these are things I've heard before, and I don't think any of these are really misconceptions. I think they're accurate to an extent. I mean, we know that we have huge problems in terms of racial disparities and how people are treated in the justice system. We know through, if you just look at the Ferguson studies, we know that people of color are targeted by law enforcement. We want to make those changes within the justice system. We know that youth in the justice system. And I think one thing that people need to understand is once you are a part of the justice system, it is incredibly hard to get out of the justice system. And what I mean by that is, for example, somebody could get probation, but when you have that criminal conviction, it follows you forever. It affects your employment, it affects your housing, it affects your job opportunities. So I think educating people on their rights, like you guys are trying to do and trying to learn your rights, and William, as you said, a lot of people don't know their rights. It's so important because once you're in the system, it is very hard to exit the system, even if you exit your case without a scarlet letter. So I think everything you guys have said is correct. I don't think they're misconceptions. I think we need to continue to move the justice system forward. We have the highest incarceration rate per capita than any country in the world when you think about that. So our justice system is, I'm not saying it's not needed. Obviously, we understand it is needed to an extent, but there is also a lot of financial influence behind the justice system. It is a moneymaker behind the justice system. Jails are privately run at this point in time in certain countries and certain states in the United States. So there are issues with the justice system that we need to address. And the justice system, in my opinion, while there is a punitive aspect, should be for rehabilitation. And sometimes we have it very much backwards.
So how could we influence to change how backwards it is, or how the justice system is moving based off of, like you said, financial influence or more biased basis?
Yeah, I mean, I think understanding your rights is really important. I think getting involved in understanding and learning what's happening within the system and educating other people within the system. I mean, ultimately, the government is supposed to work for the people.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way we designed our government. It's to work for the people, to ensure that the people have rights. And we have a lot of say in terms of how laws are passed and what laws are passed, and expunction laws being more ready available for older people or different types of offenses, so people don't have that scarlet letter upon them forever. I mean, our legislature is supposed to work for us based on our desires. So it's incredibly important that we educate ourselves as to what's happening so that then we can go forward and advocate for what we believe in.
Now I have a scenario.
Sure.
I have a scenario for you guys first, and then we'll have JP follow up. If a police officer is approaching you on the street, maybe getting ready to question you for some odd reason or whatnot, do you know what rights you have?
Not to speak to them unless you have a parent or guardian.
Given your age, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
That too. Also, like I have the right to remain silent without a guardian or a lawyer. I also know that I don't necessarily have to agree to any searchings or anything like that.
That I can ask them for proof of, like, that they're actually an officer and a warrant.
Yeah, so I think you guys are nailing some really key rights. So the way that it works is any law enforcement officer at any point in time can approach you and talk to you, right? I mean, I can talk to you, a law enforcement officer can talk to you. The question is, do you have to talk to that law enforcement officer back? And anytime there is a police interaction, I think there should be one main focus, and that's just to be able to leave the interaction, to be able to go home.
Mm-hmm.
So if a law enforcement officer comes and they talk to you, the first question, if you don't want to talk to them, you have every right to remain silent. That's one of our main rights. And you can ask the officer, am I being detained? And if the officer says no, you have every right to walk away. Okay? If the officer says, yes, you're being detained, then you don't have the right to walk away. Now, for an officer to detain you, they need what we would call reasonable suspicion that you have committed a crime, are about to commit a crime, or in the act of committing a crime. So if they say you're being detained, even if you've done nothing wrong, you don't have the right to just walk away. Okay? But you don't have an obligation to answer any questions. Does that make sense? You have the right to remain silent at the same time. The worst thing you can do is provide false information, because that would be obstructing. You've now given them the right to arrest you, or to run away. So my advice to any youth that is being approached by law enforcement is to have the goal of getting out of the situation safely, to keep your hands visible, to maintain respect, and to just simply ask, am I being detained? And if the answer is no, say then, I'm going to leave, thank you, and walk away.
So hypothetically, if you were not being detained and you choose to walk away, but they don't physically allow you to walk away, what would you do in that scenario?
So in that scenario, you are now being detained. Even if they're telling you you're not being detained. They're not allowing you to physically walk away. They would have to have reasonable suspicion to do that detention. Now, obviously, there's not going to be a judge there sitting and deciding did they have reasonable suspicion at that period of time. That's all going to have to be dealt with on the back end and later. Even if you think you're being treated unfairly, which in this case, it would sound like you're being treated unfairly, you still got to listen. You still got to remain. But then if they continue to try to question you, you can simply just ask for an attorney and exercise your right to remain silent. You always have the right to remain silent, no matter what. You always have the right to your privacy. You never have to give consent to search your persons. Does that make sense? Or your backpack, or your cell phone. And I would encourage everyone at all points in time to always exercise that right. And sometimes law enforcement will make you feel like you don't have that right. They may say something like, well, if you didn't do anything wrong, then just let me search. Or if you don't let me search, we're going to arrest you and then we'll search it anyway. All right. But as soon as you give consent, you lose the ability to challenge that violation of your right, because that is always an exception to the Fourth Amendment. Your privacy rights is consent.
And as I was listening, when you said, like, if you're not being detained, then you should be able to walk away.
Correct.
Now, we have detained and we have arrested. What is the difference? Do you guys know the difference between being detained and arrested?
I think being detained is like just being put into handcuffs for a temporary amount of time and like going to jail. And what was the other?
Arrested.
Arrested is like having a probable cause to be detained. I think that went both ways, but detained was like with like suspicion, but with the other part, it's like with cause. That's what I believe.
Yeah, you're pretty spot on. So detained, what we call it's called a Terry stop. All right. And what law enforcement needs is reasonable suspicion that a crime has occurred, is about to occur, or is occurring. But the duration of a detainment is a short period of time. An arrest is a very long period of time. Detainment is a very short period of time. And when you're being detained, it gives law enforcement the opportunity to briefly investigate. Okay. But if they don't find anything at that point in time, they cannot continue to hold you there. If you are arrested, that means you're in custody, and certain rights attach immediately to being arrested.
Oh.
So detained, they can ask you questions, and you can say, I'm exercising my right to remain silent. But once you're arrested and they want to ask you questions, they have to inform you of your right. So you have to know your right through detention. No one's going to tell you you're right. They're going to ask you questions. But when you're actually arrested, they have an obligation to read you your Miranda rights before they start questioning you. Have you guys heard it? You've heard of your Miranda rights?
Yeah.
So that's your right to remain silent, right to request an attorney. Anything you say will and can be used against you. I say that because that warning is incredibly important. They are telling you in that warning that anything you say can and will be used against you. So when you're arrested and they're going to ask you those questions, they have to read you that warning, and then you exercise your right to an attorney. But in attainment, they don't have to read you that. They can just ask you questions, but you still have that same right to ask for an attorney and to remain silent.
Interesting. Very interesting. And let's take it a step further. How many of you have cell phones? All right. How many of you know friends that record TikToks and things like that, right? And record things for Instagram. How many of you have seen a recording of a police interaction? Okay. Is that lawful?
Yes.
Do you know?
Yeah.
The
I believe
interaction
so.
or the recording?
To be able to record an interaction.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. JP?
Yeah, so it's your First Amendment right. You do have the right, and courts have ruled on this, to record law enforcement as they conduct their job. What you can't do is you can't interfere. So it's reasonableness in time and place. So if you're in a public place and law enforcement's arresting somebody and you feel like they're being unfair or they're violating this individual's constitutional rights, you have every right to record it. But you cannot interject yourself into the setting where it obstructs the officer's ability to do their job. Okay? And that's really important. And sometimes law enforcement may say, give me your phone, or you have to turn that off. You don't. But you do have to back away from the situation so that you're not in the middle of the situation and obstructing that law enforcement officer's ability to do their job.
So as long as you don't interfere or engage in the situation happening, you have every right to record.
You have every right to record. And no law enforcement should ever tell you otherwise. That would be a violation of your First Amendment. So you have the right to record. You have the right to keep your phone. You don't have to delete that recording. But you can't just get in the way of them doing their job.
So if there's a situation, let's use that scenario,
Sure.
that you're recording a police interaction with someone else and they tell you to turn your phone off. You back away, but you don't turn the phone off and you're not interfering. And they try to, or another police officer tries to get at you for recording. Could you take that to court that they're not letting you exercise your rights?
You could. Yes, you can. So, well, the question is, what is the claim going to be, right? I mean, they're violating your First Amendment right, which is to record. You could take it to court. It is something that is potentially a 1983 cause of action, which is when you use a federal statute to prosecute in a civil form law enforcement violation of a state right. But I'm assuming most likely those cases aren't taken to court. There's more likely a complaint filed at a local level or a discussion with an attorney that would then advise you as to what the best course of action would be.
What are some common mistakes that some people make when they're interacting with police that sometimes lead to someone getting hurt or someone feeling, violated?
Well, in terms of somebody getting hurt, I think we're all very familiar with violent traffic stops that have happened, and they're terrifying. I think the number one thing in those situations, and like I said before, the number one goal in any traffic infraction or any law enforcement interaction is to get home safely. And I think the most important thing you can do in that respect is to just keep your hands visible at all times. So if you're getting pulled over, Keep your hands on your steering wheels, keep your hands up. Don't be making what law enforcement would call furtive movements, so digging around in a car or anything like that, and just maintaining that level of respect. Even if they're not being respectful to you, you don't want to become a catalyst to a situation that can quickly turn in a way that would jeopardize anybody's safety. So I think in terms of exercising your rights, some common mistakes that people make is, that they give statements. It may seem innocuous at that period of time. Why don't you just tell me where you're coming from? And then maybe somebody would say, oh, I'm coming from this home. Maybe that's the home they're really investigating. So people make statements where they think, there's nothing that bad that could come of this statement, but in reality, we don't know what law enforcement knows. We don't know what they're really investigating. And you just don't have an obligation to make the statement. So it's always best, if you want to make a statement, just have your attorney present. Talk to your attorney first. Figure out, is that the best course of action? I think a lot of times people give consent to search. They might think they don't have anything that could be considered bad in their backpack or wherever it is, but it's just more about precedent. Nothing bad can happen to you if they can't search and they find nothing. Only bad things can happen if there's ultimately a search. So it's just about knowing your right and exercising those rights. Sometimes, and this is a little bit off course, but if somebody's incarcerated, all those phone calls are recorded. So it's incredibly important that people don't talk about their situation or their case or where they were yesterday with family members. And that's something that oftentimes happens. Those calls are all being listened to. You don't have the right to privacy in those jail settings.
So basically, once you get into the system, or if you're incarcerated, that right to privacy is pretty much over with, right?
I mean,
in a sense, right?
On those jail calls, it's
Right.
certainly over with. Yes.
Got you on those jail calls for sure. So let's say you guys were walking down the street and you feel like your rights were being violated, right? What would you do? What would be your first thing, your next thing to do? What would be your first response? Like if you felt like your backpack was ransacked through, you didn't provide consent and things like that, or if they did a legal search, or they made you talk or forced you to talk, like what would be your first thing? What was the first thing you do?
Call my dad. I'm definitely calling my dad. He's very adamant about us knowing our rights and knowing what we are, allowed to do and not to do. And when things are violated, he knows how to do all that stuff. So
you would call your dad?
Yeah.
I would try to politely de-escalate the situation as best as I can, and that if I were to be detained, knowing that I did nothing wrong, then in the end I would be okay. The goal is to be okay at the end of the day.
I'd call a parent, but I'd also ask if I'm being detained. Because if I'm not, then there's no reasonable cause to search me or violate any of my rights.
Got you. What do you think about those responses?
Yeah, I think they're all really good responses. Piggybacking off of calling a parent. So sometimes you can't call a parent right away, especially if you're an adult. You don't have that. So once you turn 18 years old, you don't have the same right to speak to a parent as you would when you're a juvenile and they have to notify your parent, right? So a lot of times what will end up happening is somebody will become detained, and then maybe there's a frisk of their bodies or their persons, and they can only frisk you if they have reason to believe that you're armed and dangerous, okay? So when they take and they pat down the outside of your persons, that's if they have reasonable suspicion that you may be armed, okay? They can't go into your pockets at that point in time. But once you're arrested, then they can do a search of your persons, okay? And if you do become arrested and you feel like everything that has happened to you has been a violation of your rights, maybe the officer's not listening for whatever reason, then once you're arrested, you're gonna end up going to the Milwaukee Police Department or whatever jurisdiction you're in or whatever county you're in. And there's going to be a period of time where you're going to be in a holding cell, and you're not going to have the ability to just call a parent. And they don't have to give you the opportunity to call a parent. They may bring you into an interrogation room and ask to talk to you first. They may say things like, just talk to us and then we'll get you down to the county sooner and you'll be able to make your call sooner, okay? And that can be really intimidating. It can be intimidating for an adult. It can be intimidating for a kid. It's intimidating in general. It can be intimidating for an attorney because you're in custody, you can't leave, and there's somebody there that's trained to elicit responses from you and to get you to speak. So in those situations, it's just really important to exercise your right to an attorney, even if you have to stay in custody a little bit longer, at that point in time, then you'll be able to make that first call and get in touch with a parent or a loved one.
I can only imagine like being in that situation, and like you mentioned, like being innocent. You know, if you know you're innocent and you're in that situation, I can only imagine like the nerves that would go through, the wave of emotions, right? And not being able to make that call right away, especially when you turn 18, like you said, like they don't have to let your parent know at that point, you know? So when we're thinking about that, why might an innocent person need a lawyer? If you know, like, you're innocent, but you're in jail for something that you know you didn't do, why might you need a lawyer?
To prove that you're innocent against the law, because they could say whatever, but you're just you. But having a lawyer helps you out and helps your argument in case.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a tough system. I mean, once you're in it, it's a complicated system. And when you are accused of something and when you're charged with something, it's incredibly intimidating. It's a difficult process. It's a lengthy process. And ultimately having an attorney there to make sure that, let's say hypothetically, they found something, to make sure that they found it in the right way, in an appropriate way, to make sure that they didn't violate your rights, so that that evidence would then be... Do you guys know what happens? Let me just back up. Do you know what happens if somebody violates your rights and they do find, hypothetically, marijuana or some form of contraband on you? Do you know what happens if you're charged then?
Wouldn't that evidence be inefficient because of how they found it?
Yeah, so basically we have this doctrine, it's called fruit of the poisonous tree, all right? And when you think about it, the way that it works is, let's say all the apples are the contraband, we'll call it marijuana, that you had on your persons or in your house. And if the law enforcement didn't have the right to stop you in the first place, that's the first interaction, that's the base of the tree, and that stop is bad, then everything that comes after is also poisonous, meaning the apples that grow off of it, right? Or let's say they had the right to stop you, but they didn't have the right to extend this traffic stop into a drug investigation. Well, the drug investigation is probably the middle of the tree, and everything after that then would have to be suppressed. Or let's say they had the right to extend it, but then they didn't have the right to search. Maybe that's at the very top of the tree, so everything that comes after, wherever the bad act happens or the unconstitutional act happens, that gets suppressed and can no longer be used in a courtroom, and that's how ultimately you would protect your rights in these types of situations.
Is there a way they can argue, like even if they found the evidence going against your rights, can they still argue to use the evidence in a way?
There are certain exceptions to constitutional violations. So there's something called the inevitable discovery doctrine, where maybe there's an independent source rule, where there's an independent way that they would have found this irrespective of their constitutional violation of you. But a defense attorney ultimately is going to try to foreclose that route of argument by the state and ultimately say, look, your constitutional rights are the bedrock principles of our society. To allow law enforcement to continue to use this evidence doesn't create the punitive form of punishment and would ultimately continue to encourage these types of violations to people of their rights.
So them being, like if the evidence was found going against our constitutional rights and they were still to be able to use it, it would basically go against the foundation that the country has made. And
it would go against the foundation of what the country has made. Yeah.
I'm learning some more things. I'm glad you guys are asking those follow-up questions. Now let's just take it a step further in terms of, let's just do a hypothetical. So if somebody is in jail, let's say you get incarcerated for something that you're innocent for, right? And bail, you get set up bail. Do you guys understand what bail is?
You pay amount of money to get out of jail.
Okay. Do we know like how to get that taken care of, or how that's administered, or when it's given?
Not specifically, no.
Okay.
So have you guys ever had a friend or a family member that gets arrested, or know of somebody that gets arrested? And if you do, there may be that point of time where nobody knows where that person is, or how to get in touch with that person, or what happens next. This is generally kind of explaining that process, because I think that's the scariest thing for a family, is when they have a loved one who may be arrested and they can't find that person. So what ends up happening is law enforcement can arrest you, and then they have 48 hours where there has to be a judicial determination that there's probable cause that a crime was committed. Not that the state is going to charge the person with the crime, but just that there's probable cause that some infraction, there is some judge or some magistrate that looks this over and said, yep, it's more likely than not that this crime was committed. Then they have an additional 72 hours before they either have to charge you, or if they're going to continue to hold you, bring you before a commissioner where a bail amount can be argued. And what ends up happening when a bail amount is set, in Wisconsin, you have to post the entirety of the bail. So in other states, we often hear about a bail bondsman or a percentage. So somebody will call and maybe say, can we just put 10% down? We don't have bail bondsmen. We do have to put the full amount down. And once you put the full amount down, that's when you have what I would call conditional freedom. Meaning, yes, you're out of custody, but you can't just do what you want. You're under conditions, bail conditions such as no contact orders with certain people, no contraband, no firearm, no violations of the law, or can lead to other types of criminal charges.
Okay. Are there protections against like how much a state could set for a bail? Like could they just set some outrageous number and they just get away with it?
It certainly happens. I mean, bail is supposed to be reasonable, right? At the end of the day, people are presumed to be innocent, and bail should be an amount that is reasonable. Now, a reasonable amount for one person might not be a reasonable amount for another person. And what courts ultimately consider when they consider bail is the need to protect the public if it's a violent offense, the assurance that the person will appear in court, and ultimately they should consider their financial ability to post and the presumption of innocence, and then any defenses that the person could potentially have. But there are certainly situations, especially with violent offenses, where bail can be astronomically high, and the person, despite the presumption of innocence, may remain in custody throughout the pendency of the case. And a case can last anywhere as long as 3 months to a year and a half, 2 years.
So even if a person receives bail, they have to still go to court.
So even if somebody makes bail, they still have to make their court appearances, correct? So you have an obligation in a criminal case to attend every single court appearance that you're supposed to have. Now, if you're in custody, obviously, then you're produced from custody. But if you're out of custody, you can't miss a court date. If you do miss a court date, then judges can issue a bench warrant. As a condition of bail, you have to continue to appear, and you could be subject to other charges. And what they call those charges are bail jumping. Okay? And if you're facing a misdemeanor offense, it's a Class A misdemeanor bail jumping charge. If it's a felony offense, then it's a felony bail jumping, subjecting you to prison. And do you guys know the difference between a misdemeanor and a felony?
Misdemeanor is like a lower charge, and then a felony is like a higher charge.
Yeah. So misdemeanors, our legislature classifies crimes in different levels of severity. And a misdemeanor is any crime where you cannot go to prison, meaning that you face under a year. And they're broken up into a Class A misdemeanor, a B misdemeanor, and a C misdemeanor. In a Class A, you would be subjected to potentially 9 months of incarceration, but not at a prison. A prison is over a year. A Class B misdemeanor would be 90 days, and a Class C misdemeanor would be 30 days. With a felony, you could face prison, and that goes all the way up from a Class A felony all the way down to a Class I felony. And there's different exposure times depending on the severity, Class A being the most severe, Class I being the least severe type of felony. But with a felony conviction, you also lose certain rights that you wouldn't lose with a misdemeanor conviction. With a felony conviction, if you're ever convicted of a felony, you lose forever, just despite your age, the right to a firearm or the right to body armor if it's a violent offense. So there are different ramifications aside from just prison or jail.
So if you were to go to prison and then get out of prison and you know you lost the right to have a firearm, there's no possible way to be able to get the right back to hold a firearm?
There is no possible way. So there's a little bit of a legal split in federal law and state law on this issue. But no, I mean, in reality, the answer is no. There is some Supreme Court case law that's recently come down where the courts are supposed to look at the historical context of felons and whether we were banning them from firearms. And there's an ability to look at this specific offense now and a way to challenge getting that right back. But it's a very difficult road and a very difficult path.
Okay. If let's say you're innocent and you get charged with a felony, or not charged, but they're trying to get you for a felony, and like your life is on pause, your reputation is kind of messed up because people know about this ongoing case and you're proven innocent. Is there any compensation that the government offers for your life kind of being altered from that false charge?
Unfortunately, no. Unless there is prosecutorial misconduct associated with it, or what we call a malicious prosecution claim, they are very, very, very rare and very hard. As long as, because you think about it, when a case ultimately is started, there is some level of a judge or a commissioner that finds probable cause. So then to go around and try to claim prosecutorial misconduct when there's an independent party that said there was probable cause to proceed, which is all the prosecutor needs, it'd be really difficult to then seek any form of a remedy when they can argue we're doing our job, an independent judge found probable cause. It's really unfortunate though, because it has a massive impact and people will remain incarcerated or have a hard time finding a job. And even if you're found innocent, it still remains on what we would call CCAP for a period of 2 or 3 years, despite it saying you're innocent. I mean, people are looking that up, employers are looking that up. And if they run a background check, you can even get on a federal level arrest records. So if someone is found innocent, it's really important to then expunge the arrest record so it's completely out of sight from any potential employers.
And that's what I was going to ask about the expunging things from your record, because as you were saying, like if you are, charged with something but you're found innocent, that thing still follows you like a bad,
Yeah.
stench, unfortunately, and it tarnishes your reputation. Sometimes even with community individuals that have gone through some of those same things. How do you go about getting things expunged though? Because you said it stays on for like 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, so this is an interesting question. Let's say hypothetically you are found not guilty or the state dismisses the charges. Courts are public records. The fact that you were in court is technically a public record, and there's government interest in keeping public records. So if you're found innocent of something or something is dismissed, what you can do, or what an attorney can do, is they can move the court to seal the record, meaning it is sealed from public view. And then what you need to do is you need to expunge the arrest record, because the arrest record is still going to come up on your background check. Now, if you're convicted of an offense, let's say you're convicted of something, that's something that you want to then get expunged. They will never seal a conviction record, but you can expunge a conviction record if you're under 25 at the time of the offense and it's a certain level of a crime, meaning it has a reduction in severity. And an attorney would obviously talk to you about whether that's potentially possible. But expungement does not mean you were never convicted. You were still convicted of the offense. Expungement just means that there is no longer a court record associated with it.
Are you guys familiar with plea deals?
Yeah.
Okay, what do you know about plea deals?
They're like, oh, go ahead.
No, you can go ahead.
Aren't they like deals, like compensation almost, or like deals that you can get to reduce time or to like reduce certain charges or something like that?
Yeah. William, did you want to add to it?
Aren't plea deals like saying that you're guilty, but you want to like lower the penalty? So it's like there's guilty and there's non-guilty, but plea is in the middle. Is that the case?
So here's the reality of our justice system. 95 to 98% of cases result in a plea deal. So what that means is, let's say somebody's charged with 3 counts. 1 count of resisting an officer, 1 count of fleeing and eluding, and 1 count of possession of THC, let's say hypothetically. The fleeing and eluding is the felony offense. It's the most serious offense out of those 3. You're charged with those. If you go to trial, you're going to face all of those 3 counts. Now, a lawyer and the state will make you an offer in the case. And that offer could be, well, plea to just the possession of THC, and we will dismiss the felony offense, and we will also dismiss the resisting or obstructing misdemeanor. Then a defendant has the ability to make the decision with guidance of a lawyer. Does that make sense to me? Do I want to accept accountability for the possession of THC, make sure I don't have a felony on my record, and then go to court for sentencing. I'm found guilty of that, but not the fleeing and eluding and not the resisting or obstructing. So it's a way of negotiation like anything else. It's the defendant's choice, and it's a way to reach a resolution in your case that has more certainty than a jury trial potentially would, and maybe less exposure or risk than a jury trial potentially would have for somebody.
So plea deals, in a sense, would benefit me if I were to have like multiple charges at once.
It depends on the evidence of the charges, right? So it is basically, as a defense lawyer, so giving it my scenario, my job is always to fight for innocence, okay? But there might be situations where my client is clearly on camera doing exactly what the state alleged them to do. And I don't have any good defenses. So then I'm analyzing it from, well, is there a constitutional violation? Can I at least suppress the evidence? Meaning that my client, even though we didn't have a jury trial, I can make sure that he's not found guilty. And if the answer to that question is no, well, then what I have to do is I have to advocate for that person as a human. I have to show the state or the court that this is a really good person that may have made a mistake. And this is somebody that's deserving of a second chance, and this is somebody that shouldn't have a criminal conviction following him for the rest, or her, for the rest of their lives. This is somebody that should be able to resolve this case in a way, shape, or form, or maybe there's an upfront probationary period, they'll accept responsibility, but at the end, as long as they do what they're supposed to do, the state will dismiss it and they'll have no criminal charges. Or maybe it's pleading to an expungable offense because they're under 25, and that way I know that this isn't going to follow them forward. So you're always looking at abilities to mitigate risk, and you have to have honest conversations to figure out what is the best result for this specific person, and sometimes it's a plea deal.
That's interesting. So 95% of cases are, finished with a plea deal. The other 5% goes to trial.
Yeah, I mean that's historically what they're saying is the statistics of it. And a lot of times, and there's a lot of complaints about this from the defense bar, is what you'll end up having is, there could be the state where they're overstacking charges, right? There are a mountain of charges against you, and then they're offering you just to plead to one, even though we've charged 8. So the exposure time between one charge and 8 is 40 plus years, right? So there's almost a coercive force there. Or there may be something where if you don't accept the plea, we're going to add 3 charges because we can. And we didn't originally charge it like that, but if you do decide to take it to trial, we'll add 3 more. So you can see how that can become really intimidating for a defendant. Now, ultimately, the defense counsel, as somebody that's been a part of this, has looked at the evidence and has decided, well, can we beat this at trial anyway? But I never make the decision, and I'm not allowed to make the decision for my client. It's always their life, their decision to make with my guidance. And I would hope that they would trust me, given how familiar I am with this and ultimately what I feel like I can do from a success perspective for them.
And now I know you guys are in AP government and things like that. And you talk about an array of things regarding the law and the system, right? And when we think about the system, if someone happens to be placed into the system due to them doing something or being an innocent or whatnot, right? When we think of the system, do we think of it in terms of punishment or rehabilitation?
I think it depends.
Okay.
I just think it depends on the circumstance and situation.
Yeah, it depends. If you're a drug dealer, going to jail might count more towards rehabilitation because it's forcing you away from that lifestyle. But if you killed somebody, maybe I would say it's more so punishment. You're stuck here because of what you did.
Okay.
I see it more as punishment because even if you were innocent but you were proven guilty, or any other cases where you're innocent, you're still going to have a tarnished reputation because of going to court or being arrested and stuff. So I feel like even though regardless, if you enter into the system, you're doomed in a sense.
Okay. And Justin, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I've always thought, when I took a law class here years ago, before you guys even thought of, I was taught that the system was supposed to be for rehabilitation. So we're supposed to get those individuals some services and some help because now we're talking about mental health, right? A lot of individuals are committing crimes that may have some mental health issues. Some are sane, or I don't want to say it like that, but some are in their right mind, if you will. But I've always been told that the system is supposed to help rehabilitate. What do you think is going on now, and from your perspective, is
Yeah.
it rehabilitate or is it punishing?
So it's definitely not a black and white world, right? Like this is the crazy part about the justice system, and I think everybody here has had excellent points. For certain crimes, certainly there needs to be an immense punitive aspect. If you're killing somebody, you're not safe in our society, and you put other people at danger, right? So there is a punitive aspect. Every time a judge does a sentencing, they're supposed to look at the character of the defendant, who they are before they came to court, the need to protect the public. Need to protect the public could be isolating the person from the public for a period of time. And the rehabilitative, what we've spoke about, needs of this defendant or this person, right? Now, ultimately, William, you made a really good point, I think, because sometimes people will serve time for what they've done. So a sentence could be fashioned in the sense that we're going to serve 2 years of initial confinement, 3 years of extended supervision. That person then goes and serves their time, and then they're on supervision for 3 years, and they have a felony conviction forever, let's say hypothetically. Yeah. When is the point enough? You know, when do we hit a point where they serve time, and now they should be able to move forward without the ramifications of that prior conviction, right? Yeah. And sometimes for certain people, so when we talk about, you gave an example of a drug dealer, right? Certain drug dealers maybe should be in prison, but what if you're a 17-year-old kid and then you're going to go to a prison and you're going to be around people that are 25, 30 with the same type of career criminal patterns, and then you're going to learn from those people, right? And that could be the bad place for somebody. And if we're really trying to make society safer, maybe there's rehabilitative options for that person that make more sense than putting them away and isolating them from their community, and then they come back into the community without the necessary skills needed to actually change their life. Or maybe it's now way harder for them to get a job and then they'll revert back to the same thing that got them there in the first place. And you see that a lot. I mean, I think there's a common misconception that people that commit crimes are bad people. And certainly there are bad people that commit crimes, but a lot of crimes are out of necessity or out of mental health issues. And our justice system is forced to attempt to address mental health. And there's been a flooding of mental health courts, which have been great and I think been proven to be successful. I give Milwaukee County a lot of credit. They do a really good job with some of those courts. Veteran treatment courts for people with PTSD, drug treatment courts for people that maybe have drug addiction issues. But there's always a story behind, and my personal belief is most people are not nefarious at heart. They're just in a bad situation, or they don't have the coping skills necessary to address that, or maybe they don't have the support to ultimately better themselves in their lives. And what can we put in place to help them? And I think ultimately, if there are people that we can reach and the justice system can reach them in a positive way, that makes our society more safe than just throwing away the keys against certain people.
So the people with mental health issues or the people that maybe as a person they aren't bad, but their actions are bad, reflecting off of course, the mental health issues. Do you think that's a reflection of the system failing the people?
I think it's a reflection if there's like somebody that commits the same offense twice, or just in general having mental. Let me try to answer that. So I think I know what you're asking. I think it's a reflection of our society as a whole. And I think the justice system is put in a position where they have to address a bigger issue, right? The justice system should address crimes, but the justice system doesn't have the arms necessarily to treat somebody before the crimes occur. And that's where we need, I think, more mental health programming, more crisis responders as opposed to law enforcement responders. You know, law enforcement officers should be peace officers. Sure, they investigate crimes, but it shouldn't always be about getting a conviction. It should be about helping the person. And not all law enforcement is about getting a conviction. But it is really important that there be resources in place to prevent crime in the first place, as opposed to being reactionary to crime that has been committed. And at that point, they're in the system, and the system can double down on some of the issues that may have been the cause of the crime in the first place.
And just thinking about you guys, you guys are young, young men and women and things like that. So you're still considered juveniles. And a lot of times let's think about, what do you guys see going on right now with some of the other individuals that you see about, like some of the crimes and some of the behaviors that you haven't seen? What's so prevalent right now? I have something on the top of my head. I just want to see if you guys are thinking that. What do you see going on?
I see heavily, especially in Milwaukee, a
Yeah.
lot of young boys, colored boys, trying to find a life in the wrong way, like in the streets or in gangs, or trying to navigate life and also help family.
Mhm.
Milwaukee has a very huge poverty population, and because of that, there's a lot of young boys, especially Black boys, trying to provide, but the way they're doing it, unfortunately, can be in the wrong way or what they think is right, but with the law, it's not right.
I think kind of piggyback off that a little bit, like the kind of the parenting culture and the neighborhood culture, especially in Black communities, has been, you're not going to make it out, or it's really hard, and this is the more dangerous but easy way out, and your parents or your grandparents may have done it this way, so why don't you follow suit?
Yeah. And because of the expectations that are non-existent, people around this area that are mostly in poverty, they just seek to like get towards the easy way out through like dealing drugs or anything else. But
Right. No,
yeah,
I agree with that. And even idle time, right? A lot of times, everything you guys said, agree, and it's true. And even some of the idle times, like the fun that individuals are having, whether it be stealing cars, whether going on joy rides, things like that. And I know we have some other things going on where they have different dramas going on, right? But when we think about juvenile first offenders, and you and I always talk about this all the time about you guys being young, and science tells us that the frontal lobe does not close until at or around the age of 25. So a lot of the things that you and your peers, may do or act is off of impulse. So when we think about the justice system, and how do they go about dealing with those things or looking at those things?
Yeah, so I don't think the justice system has all the answers. And I would love to hear your guys' answers as to how society should ultimately give people more opportunities where they're not finding themselves in these types of situations. But I think the juvenile justice system as a tool can be really powerful and impactful if used the right way. So the juvenile justice system is first off all closed proceedings, which is really good for a juvenile. Obviously, what's happening to them is not out in the public like an adult, therefore an employer doesn't quite see it in the same way. But ultimately, the juvenile justice system is designed to protect society, but also to focus on the best interests of the youth. So there's a lot of opportunity in the juvenile justice system for what's called a deferred prosecution agreement, where maybe if the youth, with the involvement of parents, and hopefully the parents are there and able and wanting to help, they commit or they go through certain programming like Thinking for a Change or cognitive behavioral therapy or these types of programs that are designed to help them get on the right track, then they'll never have the conviction. Now, as long as the government or the state is in line with the best interests of the child, and I've done a lot of juvenile cases, and I think for the most part there has been really, really positive experiences in terms of everybody wanting to come together to help the youth, then it's a wonderful system, so long as we're looking at rehabilitation and not allowing this to follow a youth for a long period of time, or forever in reality. But in terms of immediate answers to more opportunities and finding ways to help family in the right way, I mean, what do you guys think?
I think that a lot of this starts from in the household, and unfortunately, there's a lot of households where the parenting or the guardian isn't able to guide the children in the right path or what they know the child should go because they just don't have the resources or the tools or the opportunities to do that. And I think with as many teenagers that are out trying to have fun, trying to live life, figure out life, and navigating it possibly in the wrong ways, there should be more people out trying to get at them instead of, I think there's a lot of promotion talking about how much mental health matters and how much teen mental health matters, but I don't think there's a lot of going at them. I think they want them to gradually come towards them instead of going towards the teens.
Mhm.
And I think if they find where the teens are and go where the teens are at, they can reach them better, which will evidently help them.
So the push in, coming into you,
Yeah.
bringing the resources to you, got you.
Yeah. And I think I agree with that. And it's also tough to do that because there's a glorification almost in that culture among younger people around our age where like it's seen like on social media, it's seen as cool to be posted up with a gun in your hand or something, or stealing a car. And it's like a cycle almost. Well, if my friend is doing it and he looks cool doing it, I want to look cool too. So I'm going to also go wave a gun around. And I think that's a large part of it. So I think maybe it's hard to answer because there's a glorification piece, but there's also the level that like people see their reason for doing it as different, and everybody's case is different. So I think probably the best resort as a general statement is probably like cracking down on how accessible the information is to get guns or drugs or to steal cars. Because if you go on TikTok and look up how to steal a car, it'll be right in your face, and I don't think that should be a thing.
I think parents should like be more in check with their children and like their children's relationships, because sometimes kids get into like bad behaviors because of their friends. So parents should limit their influence towards them and like try to make sure that they're on the right track mentally and physically.
All right. And they should try to limit it as much as possible, right?
Yeah.
Because obviously you guys are in high school, right? So you go to school, you're in class all day, and then however you get home. Sometimes we catch the bus, sometimes we have our own vehicles. So you have all that time before you get home to your parents, right? But the parents do have a responsibility, right?
Yeah.
But then like we talked earlier about some of that uneducated, and if they don't know, then they can't pass it on, right? So you really have to, especially at this age, it's a lot of like inquiry, like where you're trying to reach out a little bit more. But obviously, like you said, Mia, we need those resources, those people to push in. And just like today, to know your rights, we're bringing somebody in to actually provide this education, have this open dialogue, and we definitely need that. So.
I think open dialogue is very important because truthfully, there's not a lot of teens that want to, not like they don't want to, but they don't know that there's another side or there's another opportunity to do better if they've only been tunnel vision to this is the way, this is the only way I know. Might not be because of family, could be because of friends, community, whatever the case may be. But I think it's important for adults to be educated, not just for their children, but for other children, because there could be a time where having open dialogue with anyone's child or any teens could be that one life-changing experience to make a kid rethink their life and rethink their future path. So.
And not to mention, just like we were talking before, you got the media coverage and the social media coverage that kind of jays the perception of the reality and the environments we live in, and even the justice system, right?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think you really kind of nailed something for me when you were speaking. I think youth just need to see that there's another way and that there's a better way and a more safe and conscientious way. And I think, hopefully people value their futures. Hopefully people value their dreams and their desires. And in reality, guns and violence, it's really a one-way ticket to the criminal justice system, that once it has its hands on you, you lose so many opportunities to ultimately reach your dreams or your career that you want to reach or have the family that you want to have. So I definitely think role models are incredibly important, being able to see that there's a path to do what you want to do. And I understand that kids are young and sometimes they make impulsive decisions. And that's where I think, criminal defense lawyers really come in, trying to make sure that decision for a youth doesn't impact a future that can be there and should be there despite a mistake.
So I have a few wrap-up questions for you, Justin, for the panel. What advice would you give like a young person in regards to how they can further educate themselves on their rights?
So there are awesome resources online. I mean, obviously we're all familiar with ChatGPT now, so that can give you an answer in a couple seconds. But the ACLU is a great resource. The Public Defender's Office is a great resource. I think our own peers are a great resource. But you can find anything nowadays online. I think it's really important to educate yourself, and I obviously will always make myself available to anybody if they're ever in a situation or just have a question. And I think that there are probably other people in the community that are willing to step in and help youth and teach them about really important rights that they have.
And I know we talked a lot about today in regards to like our interactions with law enforcement, being treated unfairly and things like that. But Justin, why is it important for, not saying it will be them, but any youth to remain calm and respectful, even if they feel like they're being unfairly treated?
For safety purposes, I think. Always, even if you believe you're being treated unfairly, it's so important to remain calm and respectful, because you don't want to escalate a situation. You may have an officer that's on edge. It's really important to keep yourself safe. And also because if you don't remain calm and respectful, then what you're going to end up having is you're going to potentially have an obstructing charge or some other type of criminal charge. And then you've lost the ability. I can't suppress evidence of you obstructing. I can't suppress evidence of you fleeing. But if you remain there and you remain respectful and you just continue to exercise your rights, once there's a violation, then I can protect you after the fact. But if you commit a crime as a result of feeling frustrated, you can't suppress an action, but you can suppress a violation of your rights if they were to find something on your persons or they were to coerce a statement from you.
And finally, obviously we know that Justin is a criminal defense lawyer. What's the most rewarding part of your work as a defense lawyer?
Yeah, for me, it's helping people. So I don't know if you guys have any interest in ultimately becoming a lawyer, but I say this with a full heart. It is the best job, and I wouldn't want to do anything else. You get to reach people that need help. You get to protect people. You get to defend people. There's a challenge in it. It's one of the most important things that we have is our rights, and I think now you're seeing it in the need. You have ICE all over the place. People are being taken without due process. It's incredibly scary. And to be able to be the person that stands between the government who's trying to take what we value the most and to protect that person in their most vulnerable time, it's immensely rewarding. And for anyone that is interested in it, I'd be happy to talk to you more about it. It's something that you can do, and you guys are all obviously on top of it, very intelligent, and would be great at it, or anything within the justice system, whether it's a mitigation specialist in terms of getting youth involved in the community, whether it's you want to be a judge, whether you want to be a prosecutor. I mean, it's all important and a part of our system, but for it to work, there has to be good people involved in it.
Absolutely. And I'm an advocate for the mitigation specialist.
Yeah, well,
He and I talk about that all the time. Do you guys have any other questions that you might want to ask him while he's here?
No.
No.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you guys for coming on and being so brave to be on the panel with us. Justin, thank you so much for coming through.
Thank you.
Really, really appreciate it. Happy to be here at Messmer with you guys. We're going to eat some lunch. You know what I mean? Finish out some talking and things like that. So I'm just glad to have been able to provide this and be able to have this opportunity. Shout out to Padway and Padway.
Yeah. Thank you all for being here.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
And shout out to Messmer.
Shout out to Messmer.
Let's go Bishops.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Fish.